Hello and welcome to this, the 7th in our series of Mission Possible Sofa Chats, coming at you live from Edie Live 2019. I'm here on the Mission Possible Sofa, which is our area to relax, recharge and debate some of the biggest sustainability issues of our time. And joining me today for a special discussion on fashion, I have Fashion Revolution's Policy Director, Ditty, and Neliana Fuenmayor, who is the CEO and founder of a transparent company. So thank you both for joining me. What have you both been up to? How are you finding the show?
Yeah, I was just speaking at the Innovation Make It Possible, and yeah, it was really good to share with the audience our approach to transparency in retail.
Yeah, so I'm speaking this afternoon about circular systems, obviously looking specifically at the fashion industry. I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of plastics crisis in the fashion industry, and then some of the human rights impacts that remain rife across the industry too.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to start off really broadly, because the one word that I got for the briefing was this will be a discussion about fashion. But as we all know, this is one of the biggest industries in the world, employing 1 in every 10 people, and it's also got some of the biggest environmental issues. So aside from carbon, we've got chemical leaks, human rights abuses, soil contamination, water scarcity, you name it. So I thought instead of trying to go in depth on all of those, I'd ask that you guys both seem to be turning to disclosure and transparency to overcome all of those. But why? What is the importance of transparency and disclosure in overcoming these issues?
For us, transparency will enable traceability and trust, and without trust there is little to say in terms of customer engagement and loyalty to brands. So transparency is key to enable all information across supply chains, how to connect them between actors, and how we can ensure that what's claimed, in this case sustainable claims, are true.
Yeah, definitely well said. But Fashion Revolution is basically aiming for systemic reform of the fashion industry. We want to see a cleaner, safer, fairer fashion industry, and we believe that transparency is the first step towards that systemic change. And for us, transparency does mean public disclosure of social and environmental information, particularly by the big brands and retailers we all buy from. And the reason why that public disclosure is so important is because it allows scrutiny, and it allows anybody, whether you're a trade union or a consumer or a journalist, to hold brands to account for the claims that they're making about their social and environmental impacts across their whole value chain.
Great, and then I wanted to ask, off of the back of that, you guys obviously publish your transparency index, you run a hashtag Who Made My Clothes to try and get people to push brands on transparency. And outside of that, I'm seeing a lot on social media and from consumers of the same thing. So on Instagram, you've got movements like 30 Wears or Not Buying New, and then Extinction Rebellion's next protest will be getting people not to buy any new clothing for a year. Top that off with more and more documentaries and front page tabloids about this. And I'd ask, do you think that we have reached like a consumer tipping point on transparency and sustainable fashion? And if not, when will it come and what will bring it about?
I mean, I think that there has been an incredible wave of increased consumer or citizen, as we like to call them, awareness of sustainability issues in the fashion industry. But I don't think we've hit a tipping point yet. I think, there's still so many more people who've just never thought about the impacts of their clothes or never thought about how the fashion industry works and how they're part of it. So, I mean, that's really our aim at Fashion Revolution, is to reach more and more people and get them to ask that question, who made my clothes, and think about, some of the issues behind what we wear and use every day. As to when we'll hit that tipping point, I'm not sure, but I'd like to think that it will happen in the next, hopefully it will happen within the next kind of 3 to 5 years, because we don't have much time to tackle the climate crisis. So that's my hope.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say movements like Fashion Revolution and using the power of social media, Who Made My Clothes, have had an influence in brands such as H&M claiming that they've got $4.3 billion of unsold clothes. I think that's one of the effects that new generations are looking at other ways to consume fashion. That's not the solution. We need to find new ways of being part of an industry that does create a product, but that product is created in a more mindful way, considering circularity models and bringing transparency. Actually, we were just talking about how a month ago H&M has released information on sustainability on every single garment that you can look at online. So these are steps that are indicators that we're moving forward. Yes, there's lots to do. Extinction Rebellion is also a consequence of what is happening at levels of society and governance. I think next year will be very exciting. For us, as you were saying, also it's about education. We've been rolling this movement for more than 10 years, but I think it's important not to forget that we need to keep communicating and educating and informing the consumer on the best way possible to do sustainable fashion.
Great. So we talked a lot there about like what consumers are doing and how that's actually changing behaviours in a way that has made brands make big changes. But the other piece of this puzzle is policy, which is obviously your specialism, Sarah. So I wanted your insight on like what policies would be needed to bring circular fashion about. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion here in the UK. The EAC put out their report calling for a 1p tax on every garment to fund recycling, but that's on the waste issue rather than the transparency issue. So if you could write a brief policy wish list right now, I suppose, what would be up there on it?
Absolutely. So there's a few crucial things that we would like to see happen kind of in the short to medium term future on the policy level. One, we would like to see extended producer responsibility, so the 1p tax on the garment production, on each garment that's produced, is a way of kind of implementing extended producer responsibility, which it essentially just means making any company that produces textiles and garments responsible for the waste that they're creating at the end of its life. And we feel that will help drive efficiency and ultimately less wasteful fashion industry for everybody. And then the other big thing we'd like to see is human rights due diligence legislation. So essentially we'd like to see the government forcing companies to have to actually look into their human rights risks across their supply chains and then report on that publicly and report on what they're doing, what steps they're taking to ensure that they're protecting, respecting, and remedying those human rights impacts. So those are the two big things that I think we'd like to push for in the short term. I guess the other thing is just ensuring that governments are actually helping citizens to better use, repair, reuse, and recycle their clothing. Right now it's too inconvenient, it's too difficult, timely, costly for people to get their things repaired. The incentives just aren't right. So we would want the government, and we have been pushing the government to make those changes.
Yeah, the EAC did recommend, and I remember this now, they also wanted mending classes back in schools and tax breaks for repairs, because at the moment, why would you pay to get your shoes from Primark reheeled when the heel costs more than the shoes did in the first place? Yeah. And then just for the last question, we'll come back to Neliana. I wanted to ask about the role of technology in bringing about a more sustainable fashion industry. We're seeing across fashion and across many other sectors with big global supply chains now using things like satellite, blockchain to track things like deforestation, and using advanced digital payments to empower staff and make sure that the money isn't going to gangmasters and that they're not forced into employment. So how do you see technology evolving within the fashion supply chain over the next couple of years, I suppose would be my question.
Yeah, well, it's not a secret that fashion supply chains are extremely complex. There's a lot of layers, therefore we like to speak about levels of transparency. We have the social, the environmental, the financial transparency, as well as the governance and the product compliance. So there's a lot of data points to connect, and I think that's how technology can help to create this universal source of truth in which all these data points are connected in a ledger in which the information can flow in a more seamless way. However, for that to actually happen, we need to align industries, production steps, supply chain communications. And I always say it's 80% process, 20% technology. As an industry, we need to align in a common effort. Thanks to the SDGs, I think we are going towards that, but there is a lot of work to do to align the industries. Currently, we're working with Sustainable Power Coalition and CDHC on a study on how can the technology help to first align these processes and then do brand alignment with their members and how we can help them to reach their targets, accelerate positive impact, and be able to use technologies that are available there and that are being used in other sectors, as we can see here in Edie Live today.
Okay, great. Well, I think that a glimpse into the future is a good place to end, especially as I know you have a panel to prepare for. So thank you so much both for joining me. So yes, this was our penultimate video on the Mission Possible sofa, and our next one is going to be covering engaging your suppliers with the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. So I hope you'll join me for that. But until then, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from our panelists. Goodbye.